You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go above and beyond our usual stomping grounds. Going to move beyond the Teslas and the VIX and the SPY options and see what's going on in those crypto waters, the ETH, the Bitcoin options, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the network upon which so many of you are binging these days. Remember, if you're just getting the Crypto Rundown, you're just listening to that show, you're missing out on pretty much a dozen other programs where we carve up just about every other aspect of the world of options. I know for a lot of you coming to this show, a lot of you are new to options. Some of these terms we throw around here on the show, like skew and volatility and open interest, they're a little bit confusing to you. So you definitely should be checking out our introductory, our educational programming like Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. So wherever you're getting this show, make sure you upgrade to the full network feeds. So you're getting nearly a dozen programs, usually 2 shows hitting you a day out there. And that's not enough for you. You need to go above and beyond. You want to get extra shows like, of course, our Pro Q&A is coming up tomorrow, another great Pro Q&A session, as well as Options Oddities every Friday, great giveaways, live access to all of our programs. You want to ask questions to myself and to our guests and everyone else throughout the week with no waiting, no hiccups, no waiting for the on-demand to load. Then, of course, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. It is time to roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat. And one of the things I love about doing this show is it allows us to open up the network to a wide array of guests that maybe wouldn't traditionally appear on some of our other programming on the network. We're going to do a little bit of that today because in this Crypto Hot Seat segment, usually we're bringing on guests from the world of crypto derivatives, trading and volatility and exchanges and brokerage firms and all the legion of firms that operate there. And mixing it up a little bit today, we will be joined by Chris Brady. He is the author of the bestseller Launching a Leadership Revolution, and very recently, a newest addition to his stable, the Bitcoin Bride. Chris, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thanks. Glad to be on.
Well, Chris, as we are wont to do with all of our first timers, why don't you go ahead and give our audience a bit of an overview of your background in the financial and indeed crypto space. And then what inspired you to write The Bitcoin Bride?
Well, I was originally trained as an engineer. I got a master's from Carnegie Mellon and was in the auto industry for a while. Then I became an entrepreneur. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for, 25 years or more. I'm a private investor and accidentally became an author, and a book that I co-wrote with my business partner and often co-author Orrin Woodward went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list back in 2007. And that kind of launched us on some leadership training companies and some other things. And then in 2013, I bought a physical copy of Bitcoin Magazine. I'd heard of it, but didn't know much about it. And that began my journey.
Oh, that was what lured you to the dark side, an actual magazine. Wow.
Yeah. Ancient technology brought me to the new technology.
So were you loading up on crypto and Bitcoin back in 2013? Are you talking to us from your own private island now, sir?
I would love to have that story, but no, I was mystified by it, and it seemed nefarious, so I left it alone for another 3 years and really didn't start to buy it until 2016, 2017.
Still a pretty good run. That was still when it was below 1,000. It didn't really hit 1,000, I don't believe, until about 2017, right? When the futures launched and all that madness. So you still had a pretty good run. It's a wee bit above there now, Chris.
Yeah, not too bad.
But, this is fascinating to me. I'd love to know more about this kind of genesis. We have a lot of people come on the network who've written books, usually in the nonfiction category. They're talking about options education or some option strategy, volatility trading, something like that. On the crypto side, they're explaining how crypto works and all these other things. You've pivoted in a bit of a different direction. So tell us a little bit about your novel, The Bitcoin Bride.
Yeah, well, I'll quote the rock group Kiss, if anybody remembers them. He once said that they simply became the band they could never seem to watch to find in concert. And The Bitcoin Bride, the book, was born of that same need. I would talk to people about Bitcoin, talk to them about this new technology, and I needed follow-up materials I could hand them. And there are great books out there explaining Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but they're all serious business books. They're all expository, they're all nonfiction, and they all require a certain type of person to open the cover and actually read them. And I think the next frontier for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is the rest of the people who aren't initiated yet. Your listeners are way in, they're trading, they're active, but that's a small slice of society. And, the value of these things goes way up if we can bring everybody in. So I wrote a fictional romance novel set in Italy to try to attract the rest of the people to dig in and learn how Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies work.
A fictional romance novel set in Italy. I love it. I love everything about what you just said there, Chris. That's fantastic. Like I said, we've had a lot of authors come on the network. I've dabbled in fiction before I launched Options Insider. I've written a number of things on the fictional side. I'm one of those people who has about 15 different novels in various stages of completion, Chris. So I'm very envious you actually completed one. That's a feather in your cap for you, sir. But that's obviously quite a pivot. You're talking about a very different skill set from writing, a straightforward nonfiction leadership book. Now you have to have characters and plot development. Was this something you've ever done before? Or you wanted to just dive into this bold new world?
Yes, I'd done it before, but like yourself, I never published them. So I just kind of dabbled in it. I cut my writing teeth doing that, but I was always too embarrassed to let the world see those things. And then I switched like I said, in the middle aughts into nonfiction books, and those worked really well. And so I've always had fiction in me, and I always teach that you can teach more through stories than you can through just telling. And so I thought this was a good time to intersect the two and teach something complicated, which is economics and computer science and a combination of a bunch of things, through a fun story to make it approachable.
And so what has been the response to this book so far? Are you seeing new people coming into the crypto fold that maybe if you just wrote a straightforward, here's what Bitcoin is book that never would have touched that in a million years?
Well, that's right. And those books exist and they're excellent, but these people haven't touched it. My readers of The Bitcoin Bride didn't buy any of those books and read any of those books. Normally, my book is the first time they ever even made any attempt whatsoever to understand what's mysterious to them about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency world. And yeah, the response has been great. Usually what happens is people will get in touch with me and ask me how to start buying Bitcoin. So that's a good response.
Yeah, I guess you're luring them to the dark side. Let me just give our listeners the synopsis of The Bitcoin Bride, listeners. What would you do if you had to explain Bitcoin or lose the love of your life? Marcus Coleman may not know anything about winning over his potential father-in-law, but he does know Bitcoin. Before the end of his trip to Italy, Marcus must clearly explain the greatest breakthrough in the history of money. If he fails, the expensive engagement ring tucked away in his suitcase will never be worn, and success may prove more difficult than he assumed. As Marcus gets to know the enchanting Italian countryside, culture, and cuisine, he'll have to balance Bitcoin explanations with romance. I love this. I love that you went with the romance style as well, Chris, because this, of course, I could easily see this wrapped up in the cliche pink flower cover. So it's sitting there on the romance shelf in the airport. So you're going after a completely different audience that would ever pick up a Bitcoin book, Chris. So that's fantastic.
That's right. Yeah. The term orange pill. I wanted to provide a tool that people like your listeners can use to orange pill their friends. This market we all trade in and live off of gets bigger and wealthier the more people that come into it. And I wanted to go into an area where nobody had been before to talk to people who no one had convinced yet before about Bitcoin. So this book it's designed to be the ultimate orange pill tool.
It should be sponsored by all the crypto exchanges out there. You're doing their work for them because you're bringing new people to the fold. I have a lot of people who approached me over the years on the network that have written nonfiction options books and have talked about writing some sort of options novel, attempting to do what you're doing here with Bitcoin and make options approachable to a new audience. To my knowledge, no one has done that. So you're the first one I know of, Chris. So I tip my cap to you here. And again, you're going for that whole eat, pray, love audience, doing the tour of Italy, I guess talking about the cuisine as well and the romance, but also throwing in a little bit of Bitcoin. So that's a fantastic Trojan horse to get folks into the world of crypto. Let's talk about that crypto world a little bit. Obviously, you wrote an entire novel about it, so you are infatuated with crypto, as are many of our listeners. So what are your thoughts on what we're seeing in the markets right now? And maybe let's start, it's kind of a contentious point for a lot of our guests. I'd like to know your thoughts. What role do you see crypto playing in a modern portfolio? Do you view it as a diversification tool against stocks, as some sort of inversely correlated asset? We see these days it's actually moving in lockstep with a lot of the major equities. So what role do you see it playing in someone's portfolio these days?
I think it's definitely wrong for someone to have zero. They ought to be involved in the crypto market and Bitcoin to some level. And then, what percentage works for them depends largely on their personal situation, their age in life, the size of their portfolio, their risk profile, all those typical things. But I personally believe that everybody ought to have some exposure to Bitcoin. And the more they understand it, then they can grow in their conviction. Again, that's why I wrote the book, to help them make their own decision and grow in their conviction that this is solid engineering. It makes massive economic sense. And it's every bit as big of an impact in the world of money as the internet was in the world of information.
Well, the other big driver a lot of people have had over the last few years diving into the crypto markets for the first time is as some sort of hedge against inflation. Obviously, inflation pretty rampant out there right now. The Fed's trying to come to grips with it. It's very contentious. I'm curious for you, Chris, what are your thoughts of people diving into the crypto markets as some sort of hedge against inflation?
Yes, I think in the short term, as in terms of when they come out with a new CPI print recently, and as you and I are making this recording, the latest one was 8.5%, which is super high. And then you see stocks all sold off and bonds sold off, and yes, cryptocurrencies all sold off. They're correlated right now and acting like a risk-on asset. But if you zoom out and have any kind of a long-term time frame at all, I totally believe in the thesis of Bitcoin being an inflation hedge. It's the only thing out there in our human existence outside of the days of our individual lives that is totally finite. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. That's all there'll ever be. Lots of them have been wasted and lost. There's an issuance schedule that can't be changed that we can count on, and it's finite. And so that over time, mathematically, if you understand the supply and demand effects on price and economics, you'll realize that long term, Bitcoin is the inflation buster. It's the way to run away from the fact that fiat currencies have always been debased and devalued by their issuers. They always will. And Bitcoin is entirely decentralized and no one can tamper with it for that reason. If you take a set of calipers, Mark, and put them over the Bitcoin price history chart and stretch them out over 4 years, you can never find a 4-year period in which the price of Bitcoin didn't go up. And I believe that's proving the analogy, or proving the thesis right there, that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation.
And so what are your preferred vehicles when you're buying and trading in Bitcoin? Are you buying the spot? Are you using the futures? Have you dabbled in the options? What are you up to out there?
I'm a hodler, so I buy and hold. Yes, I've done all of the above, but I am mostly qualified to talk about buying and holding over the long term. As I said, I got started in 2016. It's paid off well. I buy the dips and load up every time Bitcoin price loses its mind and people forget these fundamentals. But yes, if someone is educated to the point of understanding options, you can make a lot off the volatility of Bitcoin and seeing how in the short term, in the near term, it's trading like a risk-on asset. You can make some pretty good predictions based on that, and there's a lot of money to be made off of that volatility. And of course, the long-term price gain of Bitcoin is going to come from that volatility too.
Towards the end of last year, we saw a watershed moment in the Bitcoin markets where we saw, of course, the launch of the first Bitcoin ETF. It's on the futures. It's not on the spot, but it's still got a lot of people excited. People have been trading that up. Have you been enticed by that BITO ETF? Have you traded it at all, Chris?
Yes, I hold some. I haven't traded it. I just accumulated some because I tend to watch things closer when I own them. So that helps. And yeah, when we talk about what remains for the big buyers, I was listening to an interview the other day, and the guy's a gold bug and he's a critic of Bitcoin, and he said he said there's no more big buyers coming in. Where's the price increase going to come from? And Mark, I see 5 huge categories of new money that'll come into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm glad you mentioned it. ETFs is the first one. It's the smallest of the remaining. It's the biggest right now. Those Bitcoin ETFs or ETFs also that hold some Bitcoin is 3.9% of the 21 million Bitcoins that will be issued. So that's a new category. We've got that one options one. And then we'll have more, hopefully, coming in at some point. There's the one in Canada. But then the next level is institutional investors. They're restrained right now by ESG charters and all those concerns. But most of the institutional investors aren't in yet. The next higher one, which gets even bigger, are corporate treasuries in public and private companies. That's 2.22% of 21 million Bitcoins. Then above that is countries, where the countries will actually put it in their treasuries. And then the highest one is individuals around the world, where only about 2.5% of the world's people own Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So these are enormous pools of money that haven't even come in yet. So your listeners are in a position to ride some really nice long-term upward trends, I believe.
Yes, many of our guests over the years have argued that we are barely into the first inning of this whole Bitcoin game. Sounds like you take a similar approach there, Chris. We're still very early days.
Absolutely. It's very hard to get that because Bitcoin's 13 years old. Ethereum, some of these are getting to be old enough that they don't feel risky anymore. But we are very, very early.
And obviously, the show is called The Crypto Rundown. I know we've been talking about Bitcoin mostly, and your book is mostly about Bitcoin. But a lot of our guests are also dabbling in other altcoin out there. Any other altcoin on your radar that have caught your fascination, Chris? Or are you pretty much all Bitcoin all the time?
I'm largely a Bitcoin guy, although I do believe some of the altcoins are interesting projects. I look at Bitcoin as the invention of the financial internet, and I look at the altcoins as startup companies. Lots of them. If you make the analogy of the .com era, you had a lot of .com companies that just went bust, but you had a few that came out and were huge. Amazon, Salesforce, 2 huge examples. I think you're going to see a parallel here. There's a few altcoins that are working on interesting projects that will stand the test of time. They'll solve real problems and they'll be around and be useful. Most of the other ones are pretty risky, fly by night, super volatile. If a trader knows what he or she is doing, they can make a lot of money in the short term, but I wouldn't be caught holding any of those long term.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you taking some time to join us today in the Crypto Hot Seat to break down your fascinating new novel. I'm going to pick it up as soon as this show is done, because I just love the intersection of Bitcoin and a novel. That to me is just fascinating. And again, for our listeners who may be intrigued by your novel or any of your other projects and they want to learn more, where should they go? What should they do, Chris?
Well, my name's Chris Brady, and the easiest place to find me is just go to chrisbrady.com. It's the hub for all the activities that I'm doing and my companies and everything else.
There you go, listeners, chrisbrady.com. Also give him a follow on the old Twitters. He's at Rascal Tweets. All one word. Well, Chris, this was fascinating. I look forward to checking out your book, and maybe we'll have to bring you on again down the road, do a bit of a book review. What do you say?
Mark, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, now we have to keep on rolling, listeners. It is time to dive into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, listeners, you got to love the array of guests that we bring to you in the crypto hot seat. Just combing the entire crypto universe for your listening pleasure. I bet you didn't think we were going to have a Bitcoin novel on the docket for you this week, but that just shows the fascinating array of people we've had rotating through that crypto hot seat. If there's a guest you'd like us to feature on the program, or maybe an interesting topic you'd like us to explore, you know where to find us at Options on most of the major social media platforms, or just, put it into our live chat if you're listening live. Hit us up, questions@theoptionsinsider.com also works, and we love to see who we can rotate in. Always keep you guessing on the crypto hot seat. Right now, Bitcoin's kind of keeping everybody guessing as well. When we were kicking off the show, most of the major equity markets were still in sell-off mode. Looks like they have rebounded a little bit. In fact, actually, as we were talking to Chris, everything has turned green now. So the equity market's back in green mode. That means crypto usually tends to follow suit. When we kicked off the show, Bitcoin was still down from last week's show. We were at about a 39,532, so below that psychologically important 40K level. I bet you Chris was buying at some of those dips there. Last week, we were at about a 46.58, so we're a little over 1,000 points below where we were this time last week. We got as low this morning as about 38,400. That was in kind of the teeth of the sell-off earlier this morning. We got as high over the course of the week, almost 43,000, about 42,700. That was on Thursday last week. Getting on out to the realm of volatility, by the way, of course, all these analytics we're going to talk about today coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires out there. If you do that, you can check out all these analytics and a whole bunch more. If you're playing around in these markets, you definitely need some analytics to back you up, and gvol.io is the place to go. If you did that, you would see that your average at the money vol hanging out there right now in Bitcoin is about a 62. So we're pretty much right back to where we were 2 shows ago. We dipped down to 57 on our last show. And actually in between episodes, we got as low as about a 53 before the vol came roaring right back over the last couple of sessions. Now it's back up to 62. So hanging out right back where we were a couple of weeks ago. Will it stay there for long, or will it continue to drift down? We shall find out. In terms of BitVol, this is, of course, Simon Ho's Bitcoin VIX, effectively. On our last show, it was a 64. That has come in a little bit, about a 62. Right now, it's actually lining up exactly with what we're seeing out there in the Genesis average vol levels. In terms of skew, last week, the skew was still negative, about -5, almost about -4.9, ticking a little bit more negative this week, about a -6.1. Again, something similar reflected in Simon's bit skew was 98 last week, 99 this week. So again, we're still hanging out shy of that 40,000 level. The puts are still in play a bit, so that's interesting to watch. Speaking of the puts and the calls, let's break it all down right now. What's going on over there on Deribit? Coming into today's show right now, we have about 124,000 calls open on Deribit. It's up about 12,000 from this time last week. Puts, we have about 62,500. It's up about 2,500 from this time last week. So still about 2-to-1 calls over puts out there. That ratio hasn't really changed. You might expect if we were hanging out well below 40,000 for an extended period of time, you might see more of those puts start roaring back to life out there. In terms of where the action is from an expiration perspective, right now, June is still leading the dance with 54,000 contracts, up about 3,000 from this time last week. April, number 2, 47,000. They're up about 5,500 from this time last week. And then May, we have about 28, almost 29,000 for number 3. It's up about almost 5,000 contracts from this time last week. In terms of what are the size open positions right now? What are the big positions in Bitcoin options on Deribit right now? Number 5, we'll start at the bottom. It is the 80,000 strike that has about almost 10,000 contracts open, 9,900 to be precise. That's a newcomer to our top 5 this week. Number 4, we have the 70,000 strike that has 10,000 contracts open. That is unchanged. In fact, most of our top 5 is unchanged from this time last week, which is kind of interesting. Again, we have a tie for the 2/3 spot between the 30,000 strike and the 50,000 strike. Both of them have 11,000 contracts. That's also unchanged from this time last week. So not a lot of new positioning on the 30K and 50K strike. And number 1 this week, the 60,000 strike that has 15,000 contracts open. that has about 2,000 more new contracts opening this week. So a little bit more action on the 60,000 strike. The rest of our top 5 mostly unchanged. So yeah, interesting action out there, maybe lack thereof when it comes to the top size positions. In terms of the most active day, it hasn't been the most active of weeks out there. The biggest day actually today. So far, we got about 14,300 contracts on the tape right now. Outside of that, hasn't been a heck of a lot. You don't have to go back too far. Just go back to the 1st of April. We had 25,000 contracts on the tape on Deribit. So kind of been a light week. We'll see if this kind of dalliance around the 40,000 strike, if that will perhaps drive some paper. Speaking of driving some paper, let's see if anything drove some paper over there on CME land since our last show. Let's start with the big Bitcoin options. Those are doing a little bit more paper. The OI is up to about 1,650. It's up about $1.50 from this time last week. Saw a whopping about 50 trading on Friday or so. So for that product, it's actually not bad. The futures, kind of a quiet day on Friday, 5,400 going up, and the OI still hanging out at about 11,000. It's not a lot of action there. Let's look at the micro products. Let's go to the micro Bitcoin futures here first. 13,500 going up on Friday. That's about average, maybe a little bit below average. And the OI is down about 1,000 contracts to 21,000. It's not a lot going on out there in the micro side of the Bitcoin space at CME either. Let's see if we can flip that script, though, as we head on out into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we explore everything beyond the big dog that is Bitcoin, except for right now when we're breaking down a top 10. And looking at the top 10, I'm already seeing some changes here, listeners. Our old friend Avalanche has kind of had a lock on the number 10 spot. It's gone. It's out of here this week. It's replaced by Dogecoin. Dogecoin back over 15 cents and back in the top 10 from a market cap perspective this week with about exactly 20 billion worth of Dogecoin outstanding right now. Number 9, Cardano, hanging out a little bit shy of 30 billion, about 29.4 billion. Number 8, XRP, 32.4 billion. Everyone's still kind of hanging out and waiting out there in XRP land. Number 7, we've got good old Luna, 32, almost 33 billion. Number 6, Solana, 32, almost 33 billion as well. So they're kind of neck and neck, talking about a 32.7 billion versus a 32.9 billion. So very close between 6 and 7 on our top 10 this week. Number 5, a USD coin, almost 50 billion, 49.9 billion. Number 4, BNB, 65 billion, pretty much exactly. Number 3, it's Tether, 83 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 352 billion. And number 1, it's the old BTC hanging out right around 750 billion worth of market cap. ETH coming into today's show was trending down. It has started to tick up as we started the show, but was at about a 29.36 when we kicked off the show. So still below that very psychologically important 3,000 level. On our last show, it was about a 30.15. So you're talking down almost 80 points from where we were this time last week. Our low, yet again, like Bitcoin, came in earlier this morning, 28.08 to be precise. So almost broke the 2,800 level before rebounding. The high came again last Thursday, almost 3,200, 31.63 to be precise. Vol-wise, we're seeing a little bit of a similar trajectory to what we saw out there in Bitcoin, even though we're a wee bit below where we were this time last week. Last week, we were at a 71 in ETH. This time, at about a 65. So actually, we're seeing a Bitcoin and ETH hanging out at very similar vol levels right now. Don't always see that. Usually see a bit of a premium on the ETH side. And so technically, we do still have a little bit of a premium in ETH, but not quite as large as we are used to out there. In terms of skew, last week, about a negative 4.1. This week, a negative 5. So both Bitcoin and ETH still hanging out with a very negative skew. Let's go on out to Deribit, see what's open out there. And let's see, right now, calls leading the dance. 1.2 million contracts open on Deribit. That's up 130,000 from this time last week. The puts have 660,000 contracts open. It's up about 35,000 from this time last week. So again, we're talking similar ratios here from an ETH perspective as to what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin options. When it comes to the volume, again, it wasn't the most action-packed week out there. The busiest day was the 22nd, actually. So that actually is Friday, so not Thursday like a lot of the other names. About 220,000 contracts going up in ETH on Deribit, which again is pretty decent. It's not blowing the doors off. We've seen 300 and 400,000 contract days not too long ago. But in terms of the recent past, we saw days with 199,000. So 220, we'll take it. It's something. And again, we'll see if this downside continues. I would imagine we'd see maybe a little bit more action lighting up the options out there on Dare. But let's see where you folks are lining up right now from an expiration perspective. First, number 3 is September with 303,000 contracts, up 28,000 from this time last week. So you folks still loving your quarterlies in ETH. Number 2 is April, sneaking in there between the two quarterlies, kind of splitting the uprights. 400,000 contracts open exactly. It's up 43,000 from this time last week. And number 1 with a bullet out there in ETH. Yet again, it's June. That first quarterly out there, 539,000 contracts open there. It's only up 15,000. So if April keeps on this pace, again, not much time left, but if it keeps on this pace, it might be able to usurp it. We shall see. In terms of where you folks are lining up from a strike perspective, what are these size positions right now in ETH options? Well, let's find out. Let's go to number 5 there as well. It is the 2,500 strike with 80,000 contracts open. That's a newcomer to the top 5. Interesting to see. Usually we see a lot of you out of the money call strikes dominating all the OI, seeing what would be an in the money call or obviously an out of the money put strike. Don't see that all the time. That's pretty interesting and a newcomer to our top 5. Number 4, the 20,000 strikes are going completely in the other direction. There's 99,000 contracts open there. That one is unchanged from last week. Number 3, we have the 10,000 strikes. So cutting that distance in half with 117,000 contracts open. It's up about 10,000 from last week. Number 2, we have the 5,000 strike. So coming down 50% again, 124,000 contracts open there. That's up 7,000. And number 1, a very relevant strike right now, the 4,000 strike. It's not quite the 3,000 strike, but it's getting close. The 4,000 strike still leading the dance. 131,000 contracts open. That's up 17,000 contracts from this time last week. So very interesting top 5 in ETH options this week. In terms of what's going on over there on CME, not a heck of a lot from an ETH perspective. The big ETH futures did about 3,000 contracts on Friday. That's kind of hanging out around their average. The OI ticking up a few hundred contracts to about 3,400. Not a huge change there. Did see a little bit more action on the micro ETH futures, though. We saw about 14,000 going up on Friday, and that OI continues to tick up. It's up to about 45,000. So there's some size open on those micro ETH futures right now, which is kind of fascinating. Still waiting for more info on those options to start really percolating through all of our various systems out there. Once we have a little bit more data we can sink our teeth into, we'll start bringing you the micro options data as well. Let's get out to the rest of the altcoin before we get the heck out of Dodge. Listeners, XRP today, 67.3 cents. Last week, 76.2 cents, down nearly 9 cents from where it was this time last week. Good old Doge, like I mentioned, resurging back into the top 10, 15.3 cents. It's got to be on the heels of all this Musk love with Twitter and everything else. Seems like Musk and Doge are inextricably linked out there. It was 13.8 cents last week, so it's up about 1.5 cents from where it was this time last week. Litecoin was trending on Twitter before showtime. Not feeling a lot of the love from a price perspective right now. It was at about a 103 when we kicked off the show. It was at 110 last week, so down a little over 7 handles on the week. Cardano, same deal, 93.4 cents last week, 87 cents this week, so down a little over 6 cents. Polkadot, 18.25 last week, 17.70 this week, so down about half a buck. And Solana taking a break as well, 102, pretty much even last week, 98.94 this week, down a little over $3. Let's throw Shiba in there as well, because that has continued to tick down. It was 0.000025 last week. This week, a 0.000024. All right, looks like as we were doing the show, the confirmation has come through. Elon Musk has purchased Twitter for $54.20 a share because he's quite the jokester out there. So obviously some of that afterglow being reflected out there on Doge as well. What does that mean now, Twitter? Under the Musk era? I suppose we shall find out. Unfortunately, that music means that's all the time we have for the Crypto Rundown today. I want to thank our guest, Chris Brady. Check out his book, The Bitcoin Bride. Did you ever say to yourself, maybe I need a little bit of a Bitcoin romance novel in my life? Well, then there you go. The Bitcoin Bride has you covered. And again, going after a completely new audience. I very much am intrigued by that. I want to check it out for myself. You can learn more about everything Chris is up to, chrisbrady.com, just BRADY, or or give him a follow on Twitter at Rascal Tweets. All one word. And of course, again, you know where to go. Check out more about all these analytics. Maybe not so much the book, but the analytics. It's gvol.io. That's the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. We got to get on out of here. We'll be back again tomorrow, listeners. A double dose coming at you again tomorrow with your pro Q&A session, as well as, of course, your monthly dose of the advisor's option. So all of you folks in our secret club going to get a fun dose of Mr. Oracle of New Hampshire out there talking about earnings vol and everything else. Going to get that live in your ear holes tomorrow at noon. And then 2 p.m. after that, we're back. Pro Q&A. Mr. Saad Hussein, get those questions in. He's been tweeting a lot more, I see, about unusual activity and all the fun stuff they have going on with Shift. I know he's been working with Nick to get some of that quick strike stuff brought to the equity options markets as well. So a lot of fascinating stuff. If you're in the Pro Secret Club, start sending in those questions now. If you're not, what the heck are you waiting for? TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. We'll be back again next week. Another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.